Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Sagar and today I have a video which a lot of you guys have been waiting for since this phone came out. In this one, I'm going to see how good or bad the single rear camera on this iPhone 16e is. Now, unlike any of the previous phones being launched in recent times, this 16e gets just two cameras. Very similar to all of the previous iPhone SE models, this 16e also gets just one camera at the back and another one at the front. I believe this is Apple's way of creating a clear separation between the iPhone 16 series. This 16e gets one camera on the back, a regular 16 gets two cameras, and the iPhone 16 Pro gets three cameras. Now I'm holding the box and not the phone itself, because this part of the video and the whole introduction as well has been shot on this main rear camera of the iPhone 16e. The audio is also being recorded internally, and just like the iPhone 16 and 16 Pro, this phone gets the option of recording mono, stereo, and spatial audio. Before we get to the image and video samples, let us check out the camera that we are working with. Now, this phone just gets two, one at the front and back, so this part of the video won't be taking too long. The front camera gets a 12 megapixel sensor with f1.9 aperture, and this is the one which we have been getting on most of the recent iPhones. The one on the back gets a 48 megapixel sensor with f1.6 aperture and 26mm lens. While this sounds like a big upgrade over the previous generation iPhone SE or even the iPhone 14 which this phone is looking to replace, but this is not the good big 48 megapixel sensor from the iPhone 16 Pro or even from the iPhone 16. This is the one that Apple has used on the ultra-wide camera of the iPhone 16 Pro, so it's a much smaller 1x2.55 inch sensor. Now if Apple is putting just one camera on the back of this phone, they could have at least put the one from the iPhone 16 if not the one from the iPhone 16 Pro, as both of them get a much larger sensor than the one they have currently used on this iPhone 16e. Anyways, we are here to check out how this one performs. So let us begin by checking the image and video samples in bright lighting conditions. The specs of the cameras sound a bit underwhelming, especially after I have told you that Apple is using the smaller 48 megapixel sensor. But the image signal processing on the A18 chip and the computational photography features gives this phone a totally different and unexpected photography experience. Now after I got this phone, I had a Ladakh trip coming up, and that gave me an amazing opportunity to test out this camera's abilities. I had a few other phones with me like the Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra and the iPhone 16 Pro. But despite of that, I ended up taking up over 1000 images with this iPhone 16e alone. Initially, I did not have a lot of expectations from this phone's camera, because let's face it, why would Apple put a good camera on the phone priced below the iPhone 16 and risk cannibalizing its own smartphone? But once I started capturing these images, I was blown away with the results. You can see for yourself, it captured incredible information in these bright lighting conditions. Even as I zoom in on these shots, you can see how sharp everything still is. While I was in Leh, we had a few cloudy days as well, so I also got to test out how this camera would perform if it didn't get as much light as in previous images. And this camera surprised me again. It took almost similar time to capture these shots as the iPhone 16 Pro and the Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra, so the shutter speed was very fast and it still managed to capture enough information to make the images look sharp and detailed. By this point, I was so convinced that 16e's camera won't disappoint me that in most of the daytime conditions, I preferred carrying it as my only camera, even though I had the 16 Pro and the S25 Ultra with me on the whole trip as well. I think there are a couple of reasons for this. First one being, this phone is very light, and the second one being, since it just gets one camera at the back, I can just take it out of the pocket, point it towards the scene and click the shot, without having to worry about switching to the wide or the telephoto camera and trying to figure out which focal length would look better. The colors coming out of this camera are almost similar to the ones from the iPhone 16 and 16 Pro. Now this is because all of the phones are using the same image processing hardware and software thanks to the shared A18 chip. In typical Apple fashion, colors look well balanced, not too dull or saturated. It captures the scene pretty much as you could see with your own eyes, and no matter the lighting conditions, the white balance is perfect in each of these shots. Now color is a very personal choice, so if you don't like how these colors look and you want them to be a bit more cooler or warmer, or if you want to increase the contrast or saturation in one or all of your shots, you can do that by using photographic styles. Now we don't get the more advanced photographic styles like on the iPhone 16 and 16 Pro, but we get the styles which we had available on the iPhone 14 and 15. You can have any particular style set for all of your shots or choose a completely different one for every shot, the choice is yours. For HDR shots, this phone uses the same smart HDR5 algorithm as rest of the iPhone 16 series phones, and it handles these extreme situations really well. As you can see, we have the sun directly in the frame in this shot. The 16e did not let the sky completely blow out, while at the same time it captured a lot of information in the darker parts and let the overall colors look as they seemed in real life. Similarly in this shot, the sun was directly in the frame and the phone did really well to balance the shot out. There are no extreme blown out or dark parts in the shot. There is a bit less contrast here because the sunbeams were hitting the camera lens at a particular angle, but I think the phone did really well to keep any obvious and distracting flares out of the shot. Now this is another good shot, where the sun is just outside the frame on the top right corner and the entire shot is backlit with the sun, but the 16E still managed to make the shot look so good. Again, nothing is blown out or underexposed in this shot, and the colors of the sky and all of the flags look very rich. Not just with the harsh conditions, this phone does really well with the dynamic range in overcast conditions as well. For this shot, the sun was behind the clouds and these stones in the foreground were appearing very dark since there was no direct sunlight hitting them. So I was a bit worried that this shot might look a bit too dark, but you can see how well this phone's camera handled the situation. You can even see the light carvings on these stones if I zoom in a bit. And this is another one of my favorite HDR shots. The scene looked really nice. The sun was behind the trees, so there were a lot of dark shadows, and this part of the floor was reflecting the sunlight and it looked almost too bright for my eyes. But the 16E did an amazing job and captured a ton of information in the brighter parts, and it did not let any of the shadowed parts of the scene appear too dark. This is a really well balanced shot. And if you guys don't know, these images are completely untouched, straight out of the phone's camera. I really enjoyed taking close-up shots with this phone. Although it gets a large 48 megapixel sensor, it will let you get very close to your subject for taking these shots, much more closer than the iPhone 16 and 16 Pro do. It is also very fast at setting the focus on any near or a far object, so you don't have to wait until it keeps on hunting for focus. And since the sensor is huge and the aperture is wide, the background of your close-up shots gets a very nice smooth bokeh. It can even set the focus on very tiny objects like this one. I had the iPhone 16 Pro and the S25 Ultra with me, and the main cameras on both those phones just refuse to set the focus on these tiny flowers. Now, unlike those phones, this iPhone 16e just can't take macro shots. Although this is the same sensor which Apple has used behind the ultra-wide camera on the iPhone 16 Pro, the lens optics in front of it cannot focus on extremely close-up subjects. And because it doesn't have an ultra-wide angle lens, you cannot take wide shots as well. Now, if you absolutely feel that you need the extra flexibility that the ultra-wide, macro and the telephoto lenses provide, you have the option of getting these add-on lenses for your iPhone 16e. These ones are from Moment and Skyway, but there are other good and inexpensive ones on Amazon, and you can choose depending on the ones which you like or based on your budget. These add-on lenses gives you the ability of taking ultra-wide, macro and wide shots without having to spend a ton of money by upgrading to the iPhone 16 or the 16 Pro. But these are definitely extra things that you will have to carry around, and they are much less convenient than actually having these features on your phone itself. You do get the option of 2x zoom on the viewfinder. You don't get a second telephoto lens, but since this is a big 48 megapixel sensor, Apple says that they can crop in on the middle 12 megapixel part of the sensor and give us virtually lossless 2x zoomed in images. Now, if these images are lossless or not, there's basically no way of telling that, but most of these 2x images do look pretty crisp and clean. These images definitely look more detailed than zooming in on the 1x shot, and that is because Apple runs some processing on top of the digitally zoomed in shot when you're taking them in the 2x mode to make them appear sharper. Since both these shots are being captured from the same camera, we don't see any difference between the color temperature or white balance between the shots. Now, you have the option of zooming in beyond 2x digitally, but I found that the shots look the most detailed at 2x, and beyond that, there is some obvious softening in the level of details. So for my shots, if I want to zoom in, I like to stick to the 2x digital zoom. Having the 2x digital zoom is a nice addition, as it lets us shoot at two different focal lengths with a single camera, making it feel slightly more versatile. By default, the rear camera captures 24 megapixel shots, but if you are ever in the situation like this where you would like to capture a lot more details so you can crop in on a certain part of the image later on and you have plenty of light around, you can switch to the 48 megapixel mode. The 48 megapixel mode doesn't always capture the best looking shot or the most cleanest one, especially when you're shooting them indoors or in less than ideal light. But in situations like these where there is plenty of light, it creates an incredible shot. That being said, I won't be capturing all of my shots in the 48 megapixel mode, because these images are huge in terms of file size and could take up to 4 to 5 times storage space compared to the 24 megapixel shot. That brings us to the portrait mode, my favorite mode to shoot in on any smartphone. Since this phone has a single camera, the edge detection for the portrait shots is left to software, and in most cases it is doing a pretty good job. Now, when the phone came out, it was not as accurate as the phones with dual cameras, especially around the hair. But with each software update, it is getting better, and as you can see, these portrait shots look really good. If for some shots you think the edge detection is not on point, you can just go ahead and choose a slightly wider aperture value, as that is more forgiving with edge detection, not just on this phone, on any of the phones that you might be using. Most of the portrait shots which I take are around f5.0 aperture, and I feel these ones turned out really good. ISP on the A18 chip makes sure that these portrait shots would turn out just the way you would expect them. When it comes to portrait shots, it is not only about edge detection, but you also have to look at the colors, skin tones, white balance of the entire shot, details of the subject and overall dynamic range, and the iPhone 16e is hitting all these points. The only thing which I don't like about the portrait shots is that you have to be pretty close to your subject for this phone to detect the edges, or else it will keep on asking you to move closer. It is same for 2x zoomed in portrait shots as well. I usually like to take 2x zoomed in portrait shots from some distance so the background compression is visible in the frame. But the portrait mode on this phone almost forces you to fill the entire frame with your subject. If you're familiar with how lens compression works, then these 2x zoomed in portrait shots while looking amazing makes your subject appear a lot wider than they actually are. So to take care of this effect, I like to take zoomed in portrait shots from a bit of a distance. But since this phone doesn't let me do that and keeps on asking me to move closer, I was forced to take these shots by being much more closer to the subject. For this reason alone, I prefer to stick to the wide or 1x portrait shots on this phone. Another issue with the portrait mode is it needs to detect a human face or it won't take the portrait shot. So unlike on your other iPhones with dual cameras, this phone won't let you take portrait shots of objects if it doesn't detect a face in the shot. It can take portraits of statues which have face and all, but not of other objects. Other than these two things, I did not find the portrait mode on this phone to be any different than the portrait mode on the iPhone 16 or 16 Pro, and that is saying a lot. So far, I am really impressed with the single camera on the back of this iPhone 16e. There has barely been any situation where it disappointed me. The camera app is just as quick to open as on the iPhone 16 and 16 Pro. The images are captured just as quickly. The processing is very similar to those phones as well, and I feel that after the initial shock of not having an ultra-wide angle lens or the telephoto lens, having a single camera actually makes things simpler and uncomplicated. Let us see how things are when we start taking images in artificial and lower lighting conditions. As I mentioned multiple times by now, the rear camera gets a smaller sensor, and cramping in 48 million pixels on a smaller sensor means each individual pixel is much smaller and can collect less light. All of this results in less overall details as the light gets lower. So to compensate for this, just like other phones, this 16e resorts to pixel binning. What this means is, as the light gets lower, the phone automatically starts combining 4 adjoining pixels to form a one bigger pixel which gathers more light and information, resulting in an overall cleaner and sharper image. This combined with a wider f1.6 aperture which lets in more light on the sensor and optical image stabilization which helps keeping the sensor steady so the light is captured for longer results in such good looking shots even in indoors and artificial lighting conditions. Now these are definitely not the cleanest or the most noise-free images that a phone could take in these conditions, but I feel most of the people would find this phone to be good enough for their indoor shots. As we get to even lower lighting conditions, the 16e still tries to capture brighter looking shots, but it does that by increasing the ISO levels, which introduces noise or green in the shots, especially in darker areas. These images still look good as long as you don't zoom in on them too much. This is the biggest downside of not having a big image sensor. The low light performance of the phone suffers a lot. So after having checked out so many images in different lighting conditions, low light seems to be the Achilles heel of the iPhone 16e, where it doesn't perform as well as we would expect it to. Don't get me wrong, these images are not bad, just not as good as I would have expected from a 16 series iPhone. These are still slightly sharper and have less noise than the low light shots on the iPhone 14. You can check out those comparison shots in the camera comparison between the iPhone 14 and 16e, which is about to hit your subscription box in the next few days. Unlike all of the previous generation iPhone SE models, this one gets a night mode and it switches to it very often. It also takes at least 2 seconds or longer exposure time for almost all of the night mode shots. This might result in slightly brighter and more detailed shot if you're very careful and hold the phone steady for 2 or 3 seconds. But I have never seen any normal person being this patient with the night mode images on their shot, which almost always results in a blurry looking image, especially if you have a lot of people in your shot. Everyone doesn't have the patience to stand steady for 2 to 3 seconds, so if you have multiple people in the shot, someone is bound to move and render the image useless. I would suggest instead of the night mode, use flash in these situations. Chances are your shots will look much better that way. Usually, I don't use my phone's camera if there is not a lot of ambient light around, even if I am using something like the iPhone 16 Pro or the Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra. And since this phone doesn't take that good of a shot in low lighting conditions anyways, I did not use it in situations like these other than for taking sample images for these camera comparison videos. So the 16e is definitely not that good when it comes to low light photography. That brings us to the front facing camera. This 12 megapixel front facing camera with f1.9 aperture appears to be the same one that Apple has been using since the iPhone 14. So there is no huge gains in terms of clarity or details compared to previous iPhones. That being said, I am really happy with how these selfies came out. I am not the one to take too many of these, but when you visit such amazing places, you are bound to capture some of your shots for creating memories, and I had no regrets clicking these special selfies with the front facing camera on the iPhone 16e. You can see the colors look good, There is a lot of texture in the shot and it handles the overall light and skin tones perfectly in all sorts of lighting conditions. I had a similar experience while taking portrait selfies. The colors are on point, the details are there, skin tones look natural and the edge detection is on point as well. Just make sure that if you have multiple people in your shot, all of the faces should be in the same plane of focus or at equal distance from the camera, or else it will just keep the face closest to the camera in focus and blur rest of the faces out. I also wish that we got the wide lens mode while shooting portrait selfies as well, so we could get to show a bit more of the background although being a bit blurred out. I think that way these portrait selfies could have looked a bit better. Other than this small thing, I have no complaints with the selfies coming out of this phone's front-facing camera. Here's a video from the front-facing camera of the iPhone 16e. It is really bright outside, so you can see how this phone handles the overall colors of the scene, exposure and stabilization when I am walking around with it. This phone, like the iPhone 16 and 16 Pro, can record spatial audio, but unlike those two phones, this phone doesn't get the cinematic mode video shooting option. When it comes to videos, you can shoot them at 4K 60fps with both the front and rear facing cameras. Normally, I am pretty happy shooting videos with the normal camera, but because I was in such majestic place, I found myself missing the wide camera for capturing 4K video. I did take a lot of videos in the 2x mode as it gives a nice different perspective by bringing further elements closer. Now there is a lot being said about the stabilization on this phone not being that good, when it gets the same OIS which is present on all of the Android flagship phones being sold right now. Yes, Apple did introduce a better version of OIS which is called sensor shift stabilization, and that is used on recent iPhones starting from the iPhone 13, but that doesn't really make the stabilization on this phone bad. Look at the road which we were traveling by. It was filled with gravels and holes and it got even worse as we climbed up. And now look at the video footage. It looks really good and stable. Most of the jitters that you are seeing are because of my hand moving around because the road was so bumpy. But the phone did really well to keep the video looking good and stable despite of this. Overall, I didn't feel that the 16e missed on anything while shooting videos. It is just as good as any of the other phones for shooting videos in bright daytime. Low light videos don't look all that good though. You see more of the jitters with each of the step which I take, and this is a scene which had pretty good ambient light around. For places with even lower light, like in this case, videos look even worse. We see even more jitters or blurry parts in the video with each of the step, and everything else in the video appears to be very soft with not much detail. So lower light is not that good for this phone, not while shooting images and definitely not while shooting videos. With that, we have seen close to 100 image and video samples from the iPhone 16e, and I have taken a lot more which I haven't included in this video. If I included them, the video would be much longer than it already is. All in all, I really enjoyed using this iPhone 16e as my camera. Other than the 3 or 4 times where I felt that I would have got a different perspective of the scene or a bit more of the scene in the frame if I had a wider lens, I didn't really mind using a phone with a single camera. I talked to a lot of my friends and family members, and I found that even they don't switch the wide or telephoto lens on their phone very often. So I believe most of the people will be happy with the single camera on this phone. I don't have an issue with having just one camera, but even after taking all these images, I still feel Apple should have given us the main image sensor from the iPhone 16 or the iPhone 16 Pro, so we could have got even better images and videos in lower lighting conditions, as right now that is the only place where this phone's camera doesn't perform at its peak. So if you are someone who takes most of your images and videos during daytime or in well lit conditions, I think you will really like the camera on the iPhone 16e. I have a lot more videos lined up, where I compare the cameras on this iPhone 16e with the ones on the iPhone 16, 14 and even the iPhone 11, so make sure you are subscribed and have the notifications turned on. So these have been my thoughts about the cameras on this iPhone 16e. Based on the image and video samples that you saw in this video, what do you think about its cameras? Please let me know in the comments. That is it for this video guys. Please hit the like button if you enjoyed this video and subscribe to the channel for a lot more quality tech videos like this. You can also check out some of the other videos from this channel. This has been Sagar and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Take care.